Greetings, members, one and all of the Salivation Nation. Should silver be $844 an ounce? Let's find out with all of these ticking numbers that you see before you. This is the USDebtClock.org website. Most of us are familiar, and it's quite informative in what it shows here. I think the most intriguing number here is the U.S. national debt. It keeps climbing second by second, climbing ever so higher. We're at $22.5 trillion in debt. We're going to get to 23 plus for sure. And so we see a lot of different numbers here, and it's staggering. And really, in a sense, this one website, I believe, is probably the best case that one could make for accumulating precious metals, for sure. But we have to interpret some of the things here because there's a lot of different data that's being thrown out here, from the United States population to the taxpayers and what's going on with the job market, anything from unfunded debt and interest. And here you can see the U.S. total debt, private and public, including all of the governments, state, local, and everything, financial institutions, is at $74 trillion. So you take that into account, it's not just a government problem, but it is a cultural problem here, it seems, in the United States of America. But we'll look at other countries too around the world and on a small scale for sure. But we have to take into account what's going on here, what's causing some of this, and a lot of it has to do with the money creation problem. Now, most of us, we understand that the Federal Reserve and the government is sanctioning the creation of more money, what's known as the M2 money supply, which is an accumulation of M1 and other money creation. But we have to take that into account so that we can understand the dollar to silver ratio, and that's this number down here. We're going to actually take a look at that. But before we do that, let's get back into this monetary supply here. This is from the Federal Reserve's website, Economic Research, and this is from the Bank of St. Louis, but accumulates it. It tells us how much money, M2 money supply, is being created each year here. Now, what is M2? It includes a broader set of financial assets held principally by households. M2 consists of M1 plus savings deposits, which include money market deposit accounts, or MMDAs, small denomination time deposits in the amounts of less than $100,000, and 3, balances in retail money market funds. Seasonally adjusted M2 is computed by summing saving deposits, small denomination time deposits, and retail MMMFs. Each seasonally adjusted separately, and added this result to seasonally adjusted M1. And you can see here that since the 80s and early 90s have been a steady and slow increase in that M2 money supply. But as we get into the year 2000, it started to increase rather substantially, and these gray areas indicate recessions here. And then we had what's known as the Great Recession, and we saw it increase steadily here. These little big increases here are quantitative easing. So here we can see this might be quantitative easing 2, and that might be 3. And the first one, I think, may have been somewhere around here. I'm not sure, TARP and the like. But nonetheless, we've seen an increase exponentially now up to through this year. And so, and of course, obviously now, as of the recording of this video, we are going to be seeing what's known as repo. And this is the Federal Reserve going to be doing this through October the 10th. So it's going to be an even greater increase, which may throw some of these numbers off. But let's get back here and let's take a look at the precious metals here and see what we've got going on here. Now, the dollar to silver ratio is at 844 per ounce of silver. Let's break that down a bit. We just talked about the M2 money supply. That is the amount of money that is being printed year on year for the amount of silver that is being produced year on year. And so if you take a look at the silver production here from the USGS, we can see very clearly what's going on in the silver production figures here. And it's quite intriguing to see. It says in the United States, mines produce approximately 900 tons of silver with an estimated value of $444 million, which is a drop in the bucket compared to the M2 money supply for sure. And in fact, you can see here in the United States production, it has gone down in 2008, back down to 3 figures now, and it had been kind of going down since 2016. Obviously, some may say, well, that means that we've reached peak silver production. But no, that really doesn't mean that. It just means that it's not as economically viable to go after some silver. In fact, I saw an interview with some miners, and they're saying that they're waiting for the price to go up to get the easy deposits of silver and silver production will increase as the price increases for sure. No question about that. But if you take a look really at the entire world production, it is actually gone up in a year's time here. So that is interesting to see. And then you can see the reserves of all these different countries. And United States does have some reserves of silver, and as other nations do too. You can imagine here Mexico, Peru, Poland especially. Peru and Poland have the highest, and they're tied there. So that is taking into account year-on-year production of. So that is the gauge and measurement. However, my feeling is, in some ways, we should probably be gauging it based off the monetary base, the U.S. monetary base, which adds in the M2 money supply to it. And it's really interesting to see where things are with our money supply and how that's going to affect the faith and full credit of the dollar going forward. Now, if you look at the debt clock here, this number, yes, I believe it's true. For every $844 bills, there is an ounce of silver out there. That's really what it boils down to. For every $844 bills that there are out there, that equals 1 ounce of silver. That is simply a ratio. It's the dollar to silver ratio, which is a lot different than value, or obviously it's a lot different than price. And some people use this number to make the case for manipulation. And obviously we've been hearing a lot about manipulation, especially with JP Morgan. It's moving up the chain, and we're seeing that it's going on there. And so how much of a role does it have to play? Some people use this statistic to say that it plays a huge role, and they're really smacking it down. But I would argue that there's things that needs to be taken into consideration. Silver is a commodity just as much, in many cases, especially for the past couple of years, and with technology and advances, maybe even more so than it is considered money. And that is obviously perspective. I believe that silver serves a dual role, has a duality about it, a dual nature. And so, with that being said, I think that one could make that claim that this gold dollar to silver ratio is simply sort of a metric that can measure the money supply, but we got to keep in consideration that $22+ trillion in debt, and the dollar is very strong right now. So it's a measure. And it is a little bit frightening when you think about where our money supply is and how much we can get away with in this country. And this is just another example of that. I mean, look at here. The paper to silver ratio is another one. And look at this. The same thing with gold, by the way, too. Gold, the dollar to gold ratio is almost $7,000 per ounce. and paper to silver ratio is 199.38 to 1, and which that would be this is probably an even better case for manipulation in my view than anything else. Now, this is measured by the amount of trades made, how much compared to mining production, and so they're able to find that measure there. And then paper to gold ratio too. So people, these numbers here probably are better representation of manipulation that's going on out there. Keep in mind, this will never really be tested, because when people get into the ETFs, they are going to literally cash out. They're not going to command delivery of the physical in this particular case. Now, we can see the change in monetary base and M2 money supply here. Great increases here, but there has been overall by the world at least an increase in silver production here. In the United States, a little bit less. But where does this play out, and how does this how can we measure this, and what is the big takeaway from this dollar to silver ratio? It doesn't necessarily reflect price because of the demand and where the markets are. And my feeling is that this is just an example of where it says more about the monetary supply than it does about silver and its rarity. And again, it harkens back to this big number at the top here. The U.S. national debt is $22.58 trillion. But look where the dollar is right now. It's still going strong, and it's pretty amazing. And this debt keeps increasing. Congress keeps spending, and I think part of the reason for that is because the dollar is the strongest out there, the strongest currency out there. It's the most widespread use, and those types of things I think are what is keeping everything going. It's the confidence that the United States government has that they can do these types of things, from quantitative easing to this repo injections, and they can do that with very little recourse or effect, and they seen that they could get away with it after the crisis of 2007, 2008. So it seems like they are emboldened to continue to do so. And with that being said, how long will that happen? How long will that occur? Who knows? But I think that is the big takeaway with this gold to or this silver to dollar ratio, and even the dollar to gold ratio. It's the same exact thing. It's just translated into gold. And here we can see here, I think this is fascinating. 1913 on this particular metric here. In 1913, when the Federal Reserve was created, it was at $2.64 per ounce of the dollar to silver ratio, and the dollar to gold ratio was $29.01 per ounce, and that was more in line with where the actual precious metals were at the time. Since then, obviously increased greatly here. So very telling. A lot of interesting numbers here, especially when you take a look at the situation with the precious metals and with the dollar. Now, I'll leave with this one last thing here. Looking at the production of gold and silver, the increase in production since the year 2000, gold has increased 22.41% in production. They've mined a lot more gold in the last 19 years. And I think that's quite fascinating to see how much more precious metals have been found in the ground. And even more than gold, much more silver has been produced. 28.58% increase. It's almost 30% increase there. And you can see that translates here to the precious metal reserves and the like. But a lot of increase in these metals. In fact, all of these metals have seen increases. So you have to take that into account too, because actually the dollar to silver ratio has come down somewhat, mainly due to some of this increase in production, but also because of the languishing silver prices we've seen. There's been less excitement in silver. Now it is starting to pick up a bit, many people feel, and I for one feel as well, that we'll see silver climb up a bit over the coming year. When I say a bit, I mean not a whole lot, probably. We shall see where it will go, but I believe we will see it increase for sure here in the coming year. And so there you go. I hope that helped explain a little bit about the U.S. debt clock. Several members of the community have been posting the statistics, and I kind of wanted to kind of clarify exactly what they mean. It doesn't necessarily reflect what the true price discovery should be for the dollar to silver ratio, but I do believe it is a reflection on purely the statistics in terms of the amount of dollars per ounce of silver. And I think that is telling, and I think it means that it probably should be higher than it is now. But how much higher is anyone's guess, because there's a lot of other factors out there: supply, demand, usage, how it's valued in terms of the markets, the paper markets, the electronic markets, and the physical, in terms of how it's accumulated by those of us who stack it for protection against economic instability, jewelry, and all these different uses, biomedical technology, industry, a lot of different things that come into play there. Post your thoughts below. Would like to extend a multitude of gratitude, y'all, for watching, and encourage you to please rate, share, comment, and subscribe.